joined right now by U.S. Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma, a great friend of the American Center for Law and Justice. Senator Lankford's leading a team of senators who have sent a letter to the chairman of the Senate Committee on Homeland Security to bring back Secretary Mayorkas to answer a lot of questions about this Disinformation Governance Board, which is not completely dead yet. As the Biden administration said, they want to bring it back. It wasn't a good rollout. So go right to Senator Lankford. And Senator, I appreciate you joining us today on the broadcast. Let me go first to the letter, because it lays out, we've been laying it out for our audience, the misstatements, I mean, if you want to call them lies, misstatements, however you want to characterize it, from Secretary Mayorkas to you and the senators on that committee about when this governance board started, what its purpose was, if it was going to target Americans or where its target was. And it was all the opposite. Everything was the opposite of what he was testifying to.
Right, from the most basic elements of, is there a charter document? Do you have documentation? It was like, we're just still getting together, when they actually had already documents. They already had an outline for it. They already made decisions for it, to what it was going to do. It was going to be outward focused. It was going to be focused on internationals. It was going to be dealing with immigration issues internationally, putting down rumors that cartels put out. When we actually find out, no, it's going to be on mass. It's going to be on anything on election security they want to be able to put out. It's basically what they think is not the correct line to have. They want to be able to help put out the information on. And what I try to affirm to them is, people are not looking to the government to say, tell me what's right and wrong. They're looking to the government to do the right thing, and that includes protecting the rights of Americans to be able to have free speech and not try to go manage speech. So clearly that's what this is about. They can blame it on it's a bad rollout. It's a bad idea is really what it is.
Senator, one of the concerns that we had, of course, and we've talked to you about this before, and I'm glad you're addressing this again with the Secretary, and that is this whole idea that you'd have a disinformation board, anyways, is so antithetical to the First Amendment. I mean, cuts so against First Amendment free speech and the concept of ordered liberty, that you'd have the government determining what was the appropriate speech for individual citizens. And then you had to complicate it. The secretary is saying, this is, foreign governments we're looking at that may be doing disinformation campaigns, when they already had listed had talking points on U.S. surveillance of American citizens. We sent a Freedom of Information Act request into Homeland Security, which, of course, they didn't respond to. We now have gone to court. How dangerous is the proposal that Homeland Security put forward here with this Disinformation Board to freedoms for the American people?
Yeah, let me cut to the chase on it. One thing, if government says, okay, here's the CDC website, this is what we believe scientists are saying, or here's what we think accurate information is. It's very different. What you had here was DHS cooperating with Twitter to say, hey, let's help identify together what is misinformation and what we're going to disqualify, and then we're going to work on trying to be able to get those things taken out of American conversations. Now you're talking about government working with a private group to be able to silence voices that government doesn't agree with. That's a very different issue. So this is not just putting out, quote-unquote, accurate information. This is trying to be able to silence voices and working with private companies and entities to be able to find out a way to be able to take out your enemies. People who disagree with you need to be silenced, and if they're working with outside individuals to do it, that is a toxic combination.
I mean, I wouldn't think, Senator, what he was testifying about originally were things I would think that DHS was already doing. They didn't need to bring in a 32-year-old, 33-year-old expert on Twitter on drug cartels or on Russian cyber attacks on U.S. infrastructure. And so it never made sense, because the people that they were empowering, like Nina Jankowicz, to be the executive director of this, would have had no expertise in that kind of security. And I would have imagined Department of Homeland Security should already have been doing that, should already do this work. And they don't need to come up with even the title alone. Just shows me how out of touch they are with the American people, that someone thought this would be a good thing to do. Well, let's do a Disinformation Governance Board after all these attacks about social media and content providers and flagging posts and comments, that in an election year, we're going to come out with a Disinformation Governance Board. But yet they did. And he does need to come back to your committee and testify to the truth about what is going on.
He does. There's just basic facts that when we asked him very simple questions, I get one set of answers. When we get documents and background, it's a very different set of answers, and it's not just loosely out there. It's things that actually had his physical signature on it, that he was very well aware that the answer he was giving us was incorrect. And by the way, you are correct. The State Department already engages with misinformation from overseas. There are already entities to do this. So at a minimum, it's redundant in government and not needed. If there's misinformation moving from cartels internationally, State Department's already engaged in those areas. But this was not about just international movement in cartels. This was about managing American speech and working with private entities to find a way to be able to silence voices they disagree with.
I wanted to change topics a little bit, Senator, and that is the situation that the American people are facing right now with skyrocketing in inflation, but also gas prices that are just unbelievable. And in some states, it's $7 and $8 a gallon. In others, it's $5. You come from an energy state. I mean, what's your sense of what? I think the Biden administration had a bad policy to begin with, and then they just doubled down on it, which has made it worse. We went from energy independence, energy exporter, to now we're begging the Saudis and Venezuela to help us, and the president's threatening oil companies after he told them he was going to try to shut them down in the next 3 to 5 years.
It is amazing to me. It's the most disjointed policy because they're just flailing. They are fulfilling the climate activist desires of just take out all fossil fuel. And this was the simple thing that they continue to say, and that candidate Biden said to someone on the campaign trail in one of the events when they asked about, are you going to get rid of fossil fuels? And he said, look at me. He walked right up to her and said, I'm going to get rid of fossil fuels. Well, this is what this looks like. When he tries to drop tariffs on solar panels coming from foreign companies to try to offset the high cost of energy, just shows how out of touch this administration is. Our allies are confused by it, that literally he's going to Saudi Arabia to be able to ask if they can get more oil when Canada, our next door neighbor, is saying we have lots of oil and you cut off the pipeline from us. Our energy companies are confused because they're literally cutting off access to capital, access to moving pipelines, access to more drilling on federal lands and waters. At the same time, he's saying, I'm going to punish you if you don't actually do more refining. It's the most bizarre set of ideas that lead to this kind of policy and this kind of price flux. This is not hard. It's supply and demand. You increase supply, the price goes down. It's not just that it's global. Everybody's trying to say now, well, it's a global issue. The American price, what's called WTI, West Texas Intermediate, is traditionally much lower than the Brent crude price, which is the international price, because we produce our own. Yes, it's a global market, but our prices are less. Now it's almost identical, global and us, because we don't have enough production here.
And then he blames it on Vladimir Putin. I mean, that seems to be the White House's excuse for everything, Senator.
It is, but it has been for a while. As you can remember during the Trump administration, it was Russia, 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 right. Everything, and they've just shifted back to that same playbook.
Senator Lankford, I appreciate you joining us on the broadcast.